Hey, I'm Anna Roberts and you're watching Comms Over Coffee, bringing more clarity, confidence and creativity to every aspect of your life. Now, if you feel like your journey is maybe a little bit uninspiring and you haven't achieved anything that you think is worthy of sharing with your audience, today's episode is actually for you. Today's question comes from Tracy, who writes, "Hey Anna, I'm really struggling with sharing more of my personal life while I build my professional brand. Now, even though I've worked hard to be successful, I don't think I have anything that's inspirational that's happened to me, and if I share my experience, my failures or my history, I'm worried I'll be perceived as weak, or people will think it's strange that I'm sharing my journey in a professional sense." Now, I know everybody in my industry overshares today with social media, but that's just not me. Have you got any tips? Thanks so much. Well, thank you so much for your question, Tracy. This is something that I often get asked. What do I post and how do I remain professional on social media if I feel like I don't have an inspiring story to tell? Well, there's a study that was published in the Journal of Brand Management. Consumers who were actually exposed to a story described the brand and the business that they were hearing about in much more positive terms. And they were also willing to pay far more for the product than those who didn't hear the story. There's case studies as well from places around the world, business schools like Stanford. Now they show that existing companies like the Home Shopping Network, they've reinvented themselves based actually on storytelling principles. There's also new companies as well. So Brit & Co, who's online, you might have seen them on Facebook. They've combined the traditional DIY and online platforms with these storytelling principles, and they've managed to create a global community out of it. So I hear you asking, what's the deal with storytelling? Why? Well, as long as there have been humans around, there have been stories. We've been communicating. Stories that were told orally, they're one of the first forms of human communication. So think about it. They were used to learn from one another about experiences. We didn't have laptops back then. But today, they're still very much at the center of all that we do and say, even with the tech advancements. But when we think of stories, often we go to a place of extremes. So think of thrilling fiction books or childhood fables or that over-exaggerating friend that we all have. We don't often think about the ability that stories have to provide meaning or create context and instill that sense of purpose in all that we do. Now, we're surrounded by stories. Half of our conversations that we have as human beings come in the form of stories. And this is the sort of thing that you've got to share with someone today, the worst mistake that you can make in life is thinking that other people don't care what you have to say. So with that, let's dive in straight away to 5 strategies to help you combat those negative effects of thinking that storytelling sucks. So number 1 is to be remembered. As humans, we're far more receptive to stories than we are to data or to hard facts or numbers. That's because stories actually help us relate. They allow us to empathize. They allow our brains to process information in a way that's far more memorable and easy to digest. Strategy number 2 is that stories sell. So think about it. Most annual reports that you'll read from a business, they all begin with text. That's because it allows businesses to write their own story, to control the narrative instead of waiting for other people to interpret their numbers. It's also why many seasoned investors actually happen to skip over the text. It's so that they're not influenced at all by the business and by that data. Strategy number 3, stories set context. So it may seem a little bit counterintuitive to start a presentation with a story, but because stories help us relate and because they're memorable, they can ground business strategy. And it can be a far more powerful tool in any stage of the innovation or even client onboarding process. Strategy number 4 is that stories create purpose for us. So there's actually a really, really good example of this done by the Wharton School of Business in a study that they did back in about 2007. So participants who were collecting donations in a call center were split into 2 groups. One group was told how the money that they earned would improve their own lives, while the other was told stories about how their earnings would help the lives of others. Now, because of the sense of purpose, these stories that they were told were sort of instilled into participants, the members of the second group actually earned more than double the average of the participants in the first, believe it or not. Strategy number 5, to round it out, stories drive action. So as I mentioned, stories resonate with people more than numbers, and that's because taking action is an emotional response to information. So if you think about it, stories actually allow us to connect with companies in more meaningful ways. They allow us to connect as humans in far more meaningful ways. You know, we might waste time on websites like Twitter, we'll become followers on social media, you know, fans on Facebook, but this is all while we could be leaders of today, telling your story. So remember, and this is something you've really got to share today, the worst mistake that we can make in life is thinking that other people don't care what we have to say. So maybe try this in your next networking event or on social media if you're looking for new and authentic content ideas to share with your audience. If you love hearing more about research-based approaches to opening communication channels, boosting your confidence and channeling your creativity, then hit subscribe to never miss an episode.